Samaya, I'm recording. I need you to be silent. I'm recording.
Okay, I'll be
No, get out. I'm recording a meditation about angry parents. Seriously. I am. I'm Scott Snibbe, and this is How to Train a Happy Mind. Ironically, while I was recording this meditation, my daughter barged in, and we had a little angry exchange, and we did resolve it with a little bit of humor. Today's episode is called Meditation for Angry Parents. Although if you're not a parent, it could probably also help you deal with anger in general. It pairs with an episode that we aired just before this one about loving your parents, loving your children, because sometimes we don't. So anger is one of the delusions in Buddhism. Buddhism calls the delusions those things that agitate our mind, sometimes towards things, like with craving, and sometimes away from them, like with anger. And in Buddhism, the delusions are seen as the root of suffering, the root of our mental anguish. They're the thing we try to work on, to recognize them and apply the antidotes. What I like about the way Buddhism approaches the delusions and the mind in general is the precision of its definitions. What is anger from Buddhist perspective? Anger is exaggerating the negative, seeing the negative more than the positive, usually exclusively, and also wishing to harm. And so if you think about that in your mind for a moment, if you think about someone you're angry with, that probably rings true, that when you're angry, you exaggerate things so much that you often can't even see the good in someone else or in a situation. Exaggerating the negative and wishing to harm. Now today I'm talking specifically about anger towards kids, but also toward our partner. And again, if you're someone who doesn't have a partner or kids, well, you probably get angry too. I think most of us know that today more than 50% of marriages end in divorce. And those that end, it's usually rooted in anger. Occasionally people, just grow apart, grow distant. But anger is usually the thing that's poisonous to the relationship. We get many messages that anger is good in our society, including in movies. I like to mention this because movies are quite frustrating sometimes because the people who write and create movies can create any kind of logic they want. So things that don't work in real life can work in movies. Sometimes that's superpowers and things like that. But I think even more insidious is like a climactic scene that you see in a movie where someone gets angry at someone else, throws a fit, tells them what's wrong with them. And it works. In the movie it works. It fixes their problem. And I want to ask you if that has ever worked for you in real life. It's never worked for me, not once. And many people have encouraged me to be angry, partners, friends, parents. My mother would encourage me to get angry when things didn't go the way that I wanted or that I felt that there was some injustice. But in our relationships, has it ever really worked when you think about it? Or if it did, were there some bad side effects? Because anger is scary. It's quite scary for people. It's scary when you have it, and it's particularly scary for the people who are the object of it. And in real life, as opposed to in movies, if you get angry at someone, even once, it can often harm your relationship for the rest of your life. It can cause lifelong resentment, wounds, protectiveness. I see in my relationships how that's happened sometimes. Or a person will just leave. Especially if you're in a new relationship, you've just been with someone for a few weeks or months, then finally you show them your anger, and that might be it. One moment of anger, and that can destroy a growing partnership. So it's worth working on anger and applying its antidotes. I asked my teacher, my closest teacher is Venerable Rene Fusey. And I was having trouble with anger a couple of years ago. And I asked him to remind me how you deal with anger. And he said to me, anger's the easy one, isn't it? And I kind of, sheepishly nodded, not quite agreeing. And he said, because anger doesn't feel good. And that really did ring true for me. Anger doesn't feel good. So when we recognize that, that anger doesn't feel good, not to mention that it harms the person we're angry at and other people, anger tends to also bleed out. Anger is hard to contain. Even if you feel righteous anger at certain injustices in the world, like certain activists, you can't contain it usually. The anger bleeds out into your fellow activists, or they're often the people arguing the most, our fellow activists, working for a good cause together. Or into your family. You come home and you're so angry and agitated, you lash out at your partner and kids. And eventually leads to serious problems, divorce, losing time with your kids. So recognizing that anger doesn't feel good and the damage it does in relationships, we want to not let it take hold of our minds. At the very least, just walk away when you feel it and come back when you can act from patience, from wisdom, from love. One of the best pieces of advice, just don't allow yourself to speak or act when you feel under the control of delusions, especially under the control of anger. Something I learned from Elaine Jackson, who we had on the podcast. We did an episode about relationships too. She's been married twice like myself. And I asked her, how to deal with anger, frustration, or just annoyance. And she said, I always paste on the opposite. She said, it's a very old, at least 1,000-year-old, actually close to 2,000-year-old Buddhist technique, paste on the opposite. So as soon as I feel annoyed at my partner, she said, and now I say to myself, I think that I'm annoyed at my wife for something small. And I think, wait, she's my best friend. She loves me more than anyone in the world. And that reminds me how exaggerated anger is, because I wasn't thinking those things and all of her many other good qualities and things that she does for me and for the world. Anger exaggerates the negative, so you have to remind yourself if you can. They say that these are the antidotes to anger. Patience, they say, well, if you're angry, be patient. Patience in Buddhism means not returning harm. It actually doesn't just mean it certainly doesn't mean just sitting there and allowing people to harm you or to harm others, but to not return harm, to shoot back with harm. And that's true, it's true, and it's worked for millennia. But Tara Brach, one of the great living Buddhist teachers who has the #1 Buddhist podcast, she says the antidote to anger is not patience or some of the other things I mentioned, although those do work too. But she says what's really powerful, most powerful, is curiosity. And I really like that. She said when your mind is curious, it's open. Because you're curious. Curiosity really is compassion, isn't it? Because you want to know, you care about when someone else is thinking, what they're doing, why they're thinking and doing what they're doing. And so I really love that, and I try to apply that too, is to, same thing with it. When I'm angry at my wife, angry at my child, think, why are they doing that? There's something underneath it. She says anger has a purpose. Underneath anger, there's some underlying urgent truth that it's trying to tell you. Some need, some truth, something that needs to change, generally. And she says our job is to let go of the deluded aspect of anger and be curious about what our anger is trying to tell us. What it's trying to change. Something in ourselves, something in others, something in the world. The other thing I learned about anger from another guest I had on the podcast, Richard Prince, a very long time Buddhist practitioner who's worked with kids most of his life as a high school counselor and also counseling parents. He says when you're feeling angry, frustrated with your child, try to tease apart what's your agenda. And especially for your kids, what's theirs? What are they trying to accomplish with their behavior? And what's your agenda in trying to, change your child, get them to do something, get them to stop doing something? It might be a really healthy agenda, or it might be, a manipulative agenda, or even a selfish agenda. So to just openly think, when you're angry toward your kids, think, what's the truth underlying their behavior? What's their need? To be curious, activate curiosity. And that helps me a lot in everyday life. Why is she saying that? So if we can tame this delusion, if you suffer from it, and I've suffered from it, it really can save your marriage. It's made my relationship to my wife grow much, much closer, because she knows that she can trust me not to get angry and to speak gently, speak to bring us together rather than split us apart. It can also keep you from having kids who resent you into adulthood. I think some of us are kids like that. We grew up resenting our parents because of moments of anger they expressed towards us, or worse. And most of all, these practices can make you feel happy about yourself, feel self-respect. So taming this delusion, if you suffer from it, really can save your marriage. It certainly greatly improved mine when I was able to tame my anger and express myself gently. Use words that bring us together rather than take us apart. There are these two vows you take in Buddhism: to not speak divisively and to not speak harshly. And so the opposite of those I think of a lot when I'm getting a little frustrated. I think, I want to speak gently. I want to speak to bring us together. And so if you practice these techniques, which we'll do a meditation on in just a moment, it can really save your marriage. It can keep you from having kids who resent you into adulthood. Maybe you're a child like that. You resent your parents for the anger they expressed at you, or worse, violence, abuse. Hopefully you're not on that track, just an ordinary parent who gets angry sometimes. But most of all, not getting angry makes you feel happy about yourself, feel self-respect, dignity. Having a sense of humor helps too. So let's do the meditation. So get yourself into meditation posture. Your hands in your lap with your thumbs touching, right palm over the left, palms up. Straighten your spine, tilt down your head, relax the muscles in your shoulder, your face. Mostly close your eyes if that suits you, and touch your tongue to the roof of your mouth. And then set a motivation for your meditation to be a patient parent, be a curious parent, partner, friend, but today especially for parents with respect to our children. To speak gently, to speak in order to bring us together. My motivation is to be a good person who can guide my child, help them grow without hurting them. And being a good example, so they grow up to be a person who can resolve conflicts without anger, without violence, without resentment. Then bring to mind someone you really admire and respect. If you have a parent who you really admire and respect, someone who is patient, kind, loving, wise, that can be very helpful to think of them. Or to think of some great person in the world, like His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Or maybe your own parents, if they were very kind and loving to you. But anyway, think of somebody who's an example of being patient, curious, kind. And think they worked at that. They didn't just pop out that way, but they had anger, they had impatience, and they recognized that they wanted to be a person who was kind, patient, curious, and they worked at it. They're still working at it. And we can be like them too. In fact, we're getting there right now by doing this practice. So now bring your mind to your breath. And we'll just focus on our breath for about half a minute in order to stabilize the mind, calm the mind, relax the mind. You can focus at your nostrils, and when you get distracted, just gently steer your mind back to your breath for half a minute. And then now let thoughts pass through your mind without trying to steer away from them, in fact, steering your mind toward them. But try not to react to them. This is very good practice. That's the first step to taming anger, is to just see our thoughts and emotions passing by, acknowledge them, allow them to tell us what they might want to be telling us, but to let them pass by, and especially don't let the deluded aspects of our thoughts take hold of our mind. So just for a few moments, look at your mind, let anything at all come into it, and watch it pass by without grabbing onto it, without pushing it away. And then we move into working with our anger. So think of a time that you got angry at your child. Might have been even recently. In fact, maybe you just found this meditation by searching online. What to do when I get angry at my child. And now let's look at that feeling through the lens of Buddhism. There's something urgent and important and true in that feeling. And there's also something exaggerated. So start with what's exaggerated. Can we see how, when we're angry, we're only noticing the negative in our child's actions? Do I recognize some element of wishing to harm, to punish, to teach them a lesson? Now, when your mind is at peace and you simply have some wisdom as to help your child grow, that's not a delusion. But you can recognize the delusion of anger because anger doesn't feel good. So try and notice that. How does the anger feel? How do you feel when you're angry at your child? And recognizing that anger doesn't feel good, now we ask, what's true in our state? There's a reason we got angry. It's not for no reason, not for nothing. So there's a mirror-like clarity in anger. Something's wrong. Something needs to change. You have a need that isn't being met. Or your child may need to grow in some way. So what is that? Try to ask with curiosity. Like Tara Brach says, the opposite of anger isn't patience, it's curiosity. What needs to change? Everything that arises in the mind passes through it unless we actively hold on to it. So let the exaggerated part of anger, which is already fading away, as we focus on our healthy needs, let it fade away completely. Now, is your need something you need your child to do? Something that you need to do? Nothing good comes from acting out of anger. Honestly, has it ever worked? Whether you are giving anger or receiving anger, has it ever worked? Everything good comes from acting from love and compassion. So generate a strong feeling of love now for your child. Think of everything they do that delights you. Think of all their good qualities, their joy, their energy, their independence too, which may be frustrating at times. But it's also what you want as a parent, for them to think of themselves, to protect themselves, to make healthy decisions. Feel love for everything your child is already. And then ask yourself, what's my agenda here? Is what I want for my child based on my own fears, cravings? Or is it something that really needs to change in them, to grow in them? If it's my agenda, can I let it go and work a little on understanding myself, having compassion for myself and how I was raised? Perhaps raised with anger, with your own parents' projection of their desires and their fears onto you. Are these agendas from your parents ones that you're now repeating with your child in unhealthy ways? And if what I want for my child is coming from a place of love, how could I help it come about gently, compassionately? Now imagine that happening right now. Imagine coming to your child with your needs, your feelings. Imagine even asking for their advice. Hey, how can I get my needs met for cleanliness, for calm, for working hard or spending time in healthy ways? Whatever that need you have is, imagine coming to your child collaboratively, asking them, how can we do this together? How can I get my need met? How can we work together? Imagine coming to your child collaboratively instead of with power, certainly without anger. And now imagine that working. And how good that feels. And then remember that good things happen slowly, bad things happen fast. We've signed up for a lifetime job as a parent. What we want from our child may be important and necessary, and it may take another 5 or 10 years to accomplish. So commit to being patient and loving through that time. It's worth it to let go of anger, to deepen the trust and connection with your child, and to feel good about yourself, because anger doesn't feel good. And love does.